Hello, I'm Tim. I'm a senior product designer on the fulfillment license team. And I'm going to give a very, very quick overview on license management and the other side of the fence, internal tooling. And kind of give you like a rough overview of exactly what we have been working on and about to work on into the future. So boom, I bet you were not expecting this. It will all make sense in a minute, I promise. The Lion King is a great theatre production in London. So if anybody has the opportunity to come over to London, I would 100% recommend you go and see this play. And I was lucky enough to go on several occasions because I had a very close friend who was a part of the cast. And from an internal perspective, an absolutely amazing production. Music, the lighting, costumes, the dancing, everything that you could ever imagine was on point. Even the food was amazing. And I'm just showing off some really nice some pictures from the production. So I had this friend, and I remember having this conversation with her when after the play. I picked her up, and a group of us dropped her home, and we were saying, "This is amazing! This is awesome! This is like the best production that we've ever seen." And then she, her eyes were kind of gloomy, and she was like, "Yeah, it was backstage. It was awful. Literally." I'm not going to show pictures of what she actually sent me because I spoke to her again recently, but she said it was an absolute mess. So people were tripping over wires, a coffee was spilled, and from what we were looking at, it looked awesome. But what was actually happening behind the scenes wasn't great. And that's kind of where I'm starting off this talk, because when we talk about internal tooling, essentially from the premise of service design, we're talking about our offstage presence or backstage. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So on stage and backstage, in the license team, we've been tasked with kind of tackling what is actually happening backstage with our internal tooling. And as a quick definition, on stage sort of helps us to determine whether customers want to come back, whether they feel like they've had the experience that they were promised or the experience that they expected. Whereas a backstage definition would be whether we are reliable, whether we are repeatable in terms of the service that we're offering, whether we can, present scalability and profitability. And this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a very high level breakdown of some of the things that we would be considered on stage in terms of what we present to customers, and then backstage in terms of the things that we are doing behind the scenes to aid in a customer's journey through their use of GitLab. So marketing sites and materials, I think they speak for themselves really. And then if you go deeper dive into the product, GitLab SaaS and the self-managed experience, of course. And then you've got CDOT, which is commonly referred to as the customers portal. And we'll talk a little bit more about that, definitely in a couple of seconds. Documentation and support interactions. So maybe through Zendesk or the other apparatus that we use to support our customers. And then backstage, interestingly enough, we do have third-party sources that we use, services rather. Salesforce, Marketo, Salesforce being more sales-led and Marketo being more marketing. And then if you think about the internal, we have the GitLab SaaS admin panel, which actually doesn't really often get thought about as an internal tool, but that is an internal tool. That's kind of what support would use to manage a customer's experience if they run into any problems. And then the license app, which is currently being retired. So going into the future, all of the functionality from the license app will be moved into the customers.admin tool. And this is the tool that we are currently very interested in and currently working on to hopefully improve. So before I show you the customers admin tool, just to give you a little kind of a background as to kind of who uses it. So support, it was originally built for support teams to really aid in SaaS and also self-managed customers. And when we think of customer service, it's usually the end of a process by which if someone has bought a subscription or a license, if they really get stuck, that's when we kind of think about customer service. And it was built to aid the customer support engineers in aiding customers wherever they get stuck. And our product can be quite complex, especially in previous licensing models and so forth. So it was a necessary product to have. And then product engineers, so developers, people that need to go in and see if there are systems that are down or things that are not working. That's who it was originally built for. And then it evolved to now, as I mentioned, the license app being the application by which people would go in and create licensing and subscriptions to send over to their end users. That has now been moved into the customers.admin tool. And it's not only used by the support team or by engineers and developers, it's also now used by PMs. PM wants to go in and see what's happening, how they can improve, and then lots of kind of collaboration with engineers there. But then now also sales and finance are going to start using this tool because of the retiring of the license app. And it's really important to gear our internal team members up for success, especially when we're dealing with something as important as subscriptions and licensing. So I'm sure you're all wondering, what does this tool look like? And I am Father Christmas today, so I come bearing gifts, and this today is your gift. But before I go into a little bit more about it, let's just take a look into what this customers.admin tool is and how it looks. So this is the example I'm showing you now is on staging. So we're not showing any kind of customers information. And at a high level, you can see that there are a number of different pages that a support staff or anybody that logs into this admin tool can go to. The actual tool itself is built on something called Rails admin, which I'll again talk about in the future, causing us a little bit of problems at the moment. And the architecture behind it is Bootstrap. I think Bootstrap 3. In fact, I think I was just checking this just to make sure. I think it is Bootstrap 3. So we're not using GitLab UI. So the components and the way that this is laid out is obviously not synced with how we usually build products. And so some of the most high level and important features is the licensing feature of this tool. And then, as I said, mentioned a few times, you can now create licensing from within the customer's admin panel. But as you can see, it's not great. I haven't really gone into the depths of the flows and so forth, but there is a lot that can be done here to really streamline workflows and make the information hierarchy a lot easier to understand. So what did we do? We did a very high level heuristic evaluation of the customer's admin tool. And this was just to break down exactly what all the pages were, how the navigation works. And I couldn't resist turning this into a little bit of a UX scorecard experiment, because there were so many things that I saw that weren't working, and I really wanted to see if I can propose solutions to fix. But before really you can, dive into any type of solutioning, you really have to, understand exactly what it is that you're going to be diving into. So this was a really nice exercise in mapping out all of the patterns. So you can see common themes where things are used multiple times across different pages and different workflows. And in this evaluation, there were two objectives that we really needed to understand. Firstly, it was the current information hierarchy and architecture. And then secondly, of the three main tasks that a support engineer needs to accomplish on a day-to-day basis dealing with customers, what does the flow look like today? And those two things merge slightly. So when working on this, I realized that when you're working on the information hierarchy and the flows, it was actually easier to do them both at the same time. So that's what I did. So you can, in the Epic, you can dive into this mural if you're interested and see all of the different things that were uncovered and all of the flows that are currently in existence today. But I was like, I don't know, I had my cape on and I really wanted to go into to see what I could solve. And then I had to take a huge step back. After speaking with support engineers and a couple of sales reps, we were dealt a kind of a huge hammer blow from engineering who said, hey, yeah, we're not going to be able to change much in the UI, if anything, because it's built on something that just takes a lot of time to reorganize and to re-architecture. Rails admin is not scalable or flexible for our needs. And so I have kind of envisioned this as two airplanes or two aircraft. And if Austin was here, he would appreciate this, knowing where he's come from previously in the previous role. But two aircraft, one is about to take off. And that's kind of the vision and the strategic vision that we have for what we could actually build. The other one is still being used, but still needs a lot of maintenance and is being serviced regularly. But eventually it's going to be at its end of life. As much as I would love to concentrate solely on the aircraft that's just about to take off, we have to really still service the aircraft that has served us well up until now, but needs to be reformatted, for use of a better term. The limitations really are hindering us at the moment. So importantly, what's next and the next steps? I think there is a huge opportunity here to really boost up our internal offerings and our internal tooling for our team members. And the next steps inside of the main Epic would be to conduct team member interviews. And these will be kind of more formal. All of the details will be left inside of Dovetail and will be analyzed and insights will be drawn from them. And my goal is to include sales, support, and product and engineers, all of the people that are going to be using this tool. And thinking more into the future again, a service design blueprint, which is essentially a diagram that will visualize the relationship between different services and components. So resources and people, how does our whole offering look to our customers? And I think that will be really useful to see. I don't think that has been done before at GitLab. And I think it will be very useful for a lot of teams and a lot of people to actually see the full inner workings of a customer's journey from a service design perspective. I'm also working on building out or bolstering our internal personas. A couple of people from UX research will probably see my pings. I'm trying to work on including sales, finance, and support engineers inside of our internal personas so that it guides further thinking around how we can best serve those internal members. And then lastly, I really enjoyed my time working with Jeremy, Pedro, Marcel, and everybody who was working on the MR widgets redesign or framework rather. And it really got me thinking about how we can best build frameworks to set ourselves up for success in the future. And one of them is a framework for internal tools or internal operations. Currently, it's usually down to the engineering team to just go and spin something up as quickly as possible. But maybe there's a way that we can create something that is scalable going forward. And also, just lastly, if you think about internal tools as also being things that, you know, not just support engineers will use or things that PMs will use or sales, what about us as designers? The compensation calculator is an internal tool, and it would be awesome if there was a framework by which, for things that are going to be spun up in the future, they could be easily be mapped to. So thank you very much. I know I've spoken for a long time. If there are any questions, please fire away.
No questions, but I'll make a comment and I'll be brief because I know we're running short on time. I loved your storytelling. This was so interesting and fun. Thank you so much. I also am very passionate about internal tools. So I'm super excited to hear how you're thinking about this. Thank you. And I'll let Jackie verbalize her own comment, which doesn't surprise me because I know this about her.
Yeah, yeah, I just commented that I get really excited about service design. It's fun, it's really interesting. You get to work with all the people. And I hope that we can carve out time to do this because I think it's really important. Cool. Let me stop recording.